As I try to further improve the mouth posture course, as I'm always trying to do, important concepts that are going to help you not only with phase 0, but also to master phase 1 and the American accent in general, especially with the last thing that we're going to talk about at the end, which is what you need in order to start forming a proper American accent before you even get into phase 1. So let's jump right into things. Now, for those of you who have not seen the first phase 0 lesson, I highly recommend you start there because this is going to assume that you've already been there. The first thing I want to bring up is that you should trust the process. I have so many students that going through phase 0, they're always wondering, why are we doing this? I don't understand. Is this going to be useful? Not only is it going to be useful, even though it might not seem like it is, and people say that they find it useful once they get into phase 2, but not only that, phase 0 is not just a playground for your vocal tract. It does that, it helps get you familiar, but it also helps you to start building the basic skills that you need in order to succeed in phase 1, phase 2, and just in general. Now, that being said, feedback. This is one of the big important sort of missing pieces that, unfortunately, if you're not working directly with me, it can be kind of difficult. Now, if you have really good ears already, then you can rely on your own ears for the most part. But at some point in the future, I do plan to train teachers in how to do this mouth posture stuff so that it will be available to more people, because I can't sit around teaching it 24/7. So for now, try to get some feedback from another person. Have them listen to the recordings in phase 0 or whatever work that you're doing, and get another pair of ears to see if what you're doing actually reaches that 80% passing grade or not. Speaking of helping to develop your ears and your perception as well as your mouth, there are actually 4 general guidelines that I want you to follow that you can train your ears for. Okay, these are the 4 guidelines of sound quality that will not only apply to phase 0, but also to an American English accent in general. Because remember, it's a very open language. Listening for these certain key qualities is going to help make sure that you stay on the right track. You want to avoid extra tenseness, extra nasality, restriction, and closedness. Now, some of these are kind of related, but for example, when we do, say, the throat back or the back of the tongue back, and we get, okay, that's restriction. That's a restricted sound. That's the quality of the sound. It's restricted because the airflow is having a hard time getting through. So if you're trying to do, say, E in American English, and you're saying E, okay, you can hear there's restriction there, and you're like, oh, that shouldn't be there. Okay, so whether it's a phase 0 exercise or later in phase 2 when we start building the sounds, start training your ears for this stuff now as you're doing these exercises. A really good common mistake that people run into, if you're doing the back of the tongue up, what a lot of people will do, maybe their dead tongue is pretty good, and as they go up, 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 they'll get close to closing, and we'll start hearing some tension or restriction from back here, like, you don't want to hear that. It should be clean, it should be light. Also, if you push on the nasal flap, see, it's heavier, it's kind of restricted. You don't want that. Listen for these qualities, the things that you want to avoid. The only exception, if, as I said, if you're doing the throat back or the back of the tongue back, we do want to hear restriction. Any other time, whether it's phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, whatever, you want to avoid those 4 things. And that leads me straight into the big point of this entire video, which is the missing piece to help you develop a natural, effortless American English accent. And that is what I like to call the back tension. Depending on your native language, it's very likely, based on my experience, that your mouth will be more closed, your tongue will be slightly pushed forward compared to American English, and this area back here, top of the throat, back of the tongue, okay, back in here, sort of maybe up around that nasal flap too, this whole section. In many languages, you guys hold this a little bit higher and a little bit tighter, and that prevents you from getting a nice, light, effortless sounding schwa sound. It is almost impossible to produce an American sounding, good, clear schwa without any extra interference if you don't address this. So this is the secret key. Now you might start to think, well, isn't that placement? Aren't I shifting the placement? What we're doing here, you're not trying to speak from your chest, you're not trying to shift your throat down here. You're literally just going to try to lower this top area down a little bit, sort of the top of the throat will come down maybe a little bit, but more importantly, it'll actually probably come a little bit outward. Now, you're trying to sort of settle this back area in the back of the tongue into this a little bit of a lower, more open position, and that gives you more space. Now, at first, that probably won't feel relaxed, and that's one reason why I disagree when teachers say the schwa sound is relaxed, because for us, yes, we're already in that position, we have the muscles in place to hold it there very naturally. Your muscles are used to holding it up here. So you might have to build a little bit of muscle in here as you shift it down to hold it there until it becomes relaxed. But the main thing you want to look for is that it sounds, again, open, no restriction, no closeness, no extra tension, right? If you're doing, instead of if you do you can hear that tension. Now you can train your ears for that, as I said, if you don't notice that. But listen very closely for that tension, and if you can start to release some of that extra tension here, let it come down, let it open a bit, you're going to start sounding a lot better. In fact, if you get it right, a basic schwa sound will happen naturally and automatically by itself. That's how you know you're doing it right. If you don't get a nice good by shifting into it, then you're not doing it right. So you might have to play around with it a bit, and I do have some exercises for you that we're going to go over here in a second. And in addition, make sure that the back of your tongue on the sides are not pushed out, okay? Because some of you in some languages do that to sort of brace the back posture. We don't want the tension there either. Don't push them out. It should just sort of be very relaxed. Now for these exercises, I have two exercises for you. The first exercise is what I like to call tense and release. Now what you're going to do is you're going to focus on this area that we're talking about, and you're going to try to tense. Don't hurt yourself, right? If you feel like something's going to break, just a disclaimer, you should be fine, but get some tension in there, more than you're used to, and then see if you can release all that tension and go more relaxed than you normally are. Because you are, the way that you're holding this area in your language, if it's like many languages are, because your language might be a little different, but if it's being held a little bit higher compared to American English, a little bit more tense compared to American English, it feels relaxed to you. But this exercise will help you start to feel, oh, I am holding some extra tension there. Oh, I am holding this a little high. And it's going to help you start to become more aware of these muscles around here and how to sort of start loosening up and opening that area. The second exercise that I have for you is more directly to actually fixing this problem. Okay, so the tense and release is like a good starting point to kind of just explore and kind of figure out what's going on. I don't think it's required, but it can be very, very useful. It's helped several people I've been working with. But for the second exercise, what you're going to do is you're going to try to shift. So you have to be aware, is your tongue pushed forward compared to American English? If you don't know that, you got to figure that out. But you want to not do that. Okay, because if it is pushed forward, even if this is relaxed, you will be able to notice that tension is gone, that it sounds more open, but you won't quite be producing a schwa sound because your tongue is pushed forward, at least not an American schwa sound. And so the back of the tongue being pushed forward creates a little bit of a special interference with the sound that my ear has very much been developed for. I can hear it usually in students very easily. But then this also creates a disturbance in sound. So if you're just doing this part and your tongue is still pushed forward and you're not getting that natural effortless schwa sound, it could just be because your tongue is pushed forward and you don't realize it. So you need to keep that in mind as well. It's all one thing, but two pieces that can cause two different problems. So make sure your tongue isn't pushed forward, and then going back into here, you're holding it higher, most likely. You're holding it tighter, most likely. So try to shift it down, just to the top here. You're not trying to move your whole throat down. You're not trying to speak from the chest. Just sort of try to shift down here a little bit. Now, a little bit for you might be a lot, but it's objectively not that big of a difference. So you're just going to open up down here a little bit. More importantly, you want to kind of push out in this area a bit. So if you're doing, normally maybe you're up kind of like this a bit, I'm adding an extra tension. I'm sort of trying to raise the top of my throat here a little bit. It's making my voice slightly higher. Okay, and if I sort of, okay, I can feel it sort of open here a bit. It settles down. I have more space back through here. It just feels completely different. So once you can actually start to kind of get that, even if you can't get that perfect effortlessly yet, it might take a little playing and stuff, but if you can start to kind of get some of that result, that's okay. Just kind of go back and forth and tweak little tiny details. Now there's an extra step to this exercise which makes it 1,000,000 times more powerful, but you're going to have to work with a native speaker. Okay, you're going to have to work with a native speaker, and you add voice into that. So instead of just trying to move it around, okay, so let's say you're just making noise, okay, like dead tongue, whatever. Okay, make sure your tongue isn't pushed forward. You're going to be tight in your starting position up here. So like, okay. Then as you try to settle down, okay, so we can see maybe I got a little more space there. It sounded a little bit more open. It's very slight. If you can't hear it, you can train your ears for that. It's okay, just practice it. But there was a little shift there, a little tiny shift. But I didn't really go out. I didn't open up this way. I just kind of shifted it down. But if I try to open up this way a little bit, let's say I just try to do that from this higher, more tense position. That's also starting to sound a bit more open, but it's not quite right still. So we can see if we just go down, there's some improvement. If we just go out, there's some improvement. So let's try to actually get both of those. You're going to kind of shift like this a bit almost, okay? Okay, I'm not doing anything with my tongue. Now there is probably a little bit of central tension here, just a little bit, because that's part of the American English mouth posture, but I'm not particularly trying to make a sound or a shape, and we're getting a nice, good, light little schwa sound. Now this is not the same as the center of gravity. The center of gravity you actually have to build in, and you will maintain and hold through all the sounds. We're going to talk about that in phase 1. This is just the foundational base posture where everything is in the right place so that we can build on top of that and get that center of gravity schwa and all the other sounds. So we're just trying to remove this extra tension, remove this sort of being held a little bit higher that gets in the way, remove that push forward tongue, get more space back there. But as you do that, as you go back and forth and the native speaker is listening to you, or if you have good ears, you're listening to yourself, right? As you get maybe kind of closer, you're listening, okay, it's starting to sound kind of like a schwa. Let me hold it there and let me try to make a little change with, going out, going in, going up, going down, just something. Try to change something. If it gets worse, go back to where you were and make a different type of change. If it gets better, then you're on the right track. So you just keep making little changes until you get as close as possible to that very open, and one final bonus tip. So what I've been telling you guys and what I've been doing with my students directly is timed exercises, right? I usually say, okay, do this exercise for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. That has worked. There's nothing wrong with that. But more recently, I've started thinking about playing with the idea of reps instead of time. Because as you go through the time, you can much more easily kind of be like, okay, I just have to do this for a certain amount of time, blah, 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 blah. And you can maybe lose focus more easily. Whatever works for you is fine, but instead maybe try to do like 5 to 10 good quality repetitions really slowly. I mean, not snail's pace, but, slow. Slow is fast, fast is slow. Never forget that if you really want to build skills really well. Up next is phase 1, where we're actually going to start building the center of gravity itself. Never forget about that area, okay? Listen for the sound quality. Thank you guys so much for watching another English Hacks lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.